This article is from the Irish Times. Make face masks compulsory in shops, public transport, immunology expert. England has done the right thing, making masks mandatory in bid to stop COVID-19. Face coverings should be mandatory in Ireland for anyone shopping or travelling on public transport, an immunology expert has said. Kingston Mills, Professor of Experimental Immunology at Trinity College Dublin, said England has done the right thing in making masks compulsory on public transport as part of efforts to contain the spread of coronavirus. Passengers will not be allowed on buses, trams, trains, coaches, aircraft and ferries without a face mask from June 15th, it was announced this week. Ladies and gentlemen, the face burqa, the dehumanizing symbol of submission to the new regime. If you refuse to wear it, you won't be allowed entry into certain places. But it's all for your own good, just like when the time comes, you won't be allowed to do all manner of things or freely move around without proof of immunity or vaccination. It's do as we say or else. It also has to be said that a mask that literally covers a person's mouth seems somewhat reflective of our time of censorship and restrictions on free speech, because it resembles a muzzle. I've previously said that we're living in a post-truth world. What I meant by this was, there's more information and evidence than ever to support the fact that this virus is being massively overblown and that there has been no need for lockdown, social distancing, or face masks. And yet, the establishment and the mainstream media move forward with their agenda regardless. You have to hand it to them. They know what they're doing. When new data emerges that destroys their narrative and counters what they're saying, they just ignore it, like it isn't happening. They double down and plow on. For propaganda to be effective, it needs consistency and continuous reinforcement. For members of the public who remain conflicted, afraid, anxious, uncertain, or confused, they'll tend to buy into this propaganda by virtue of its consistency in the face of overwhelming evidence to the contrary. The lie repeated often enough becomes accepted as truth, even in a time when that lie can be readily exposed and debunked if people would just take the time to reassess their position with a cool and rational mind. But there are those who have been speaking out about the usage of masks by healthy people. Dr. Dan Erickson has previously said the following.
When you wear gloves that transfer disease everywhere, those gloves have bacteria all over them. I'm wearing gloves, not helping you. As your mask that you're wearing for days, you touch the outside of it, COVID, and then touch your mouth. This doesn't make any sense. We wear a mask in an acute setting to protect us. We're not wearing masks. Why is that? Because we understand microbiology, we understand immunology, and we want strong immune systems. I don't want to hide in my home, develop a weak immune system, and then come out and get disease. We have both been in the ER through swine flu and through bird flu. Did we shut down for those? Were they much less dangerous than COVID? Is the flu less dangerous than COVID? Let's look at the death rates. No, it's not. They're similar in prevalence and in death rate.
Dr. Buttar has given his opinion on the use of face masks.
Because as people are allowed to come back into society, their immune systems are already going to have been suppressed because of the wearing of the mask, which is going to increase cortisol levels. It's going to put people into a pseudo-hypoxic state. They're having to suck oxygen through a mask. It drives the cortisol levels up, which then creates a sympathetomimetic drive. It suppresses the lymphocyte subpopulation, decreases the immune system, and renders an individual more susceptible to any type of pathogen, whether it be bacteria, virus, spirochete, mycoplasma, yeast, parasite, whatever. So the face mask agenda seems to be, if you look at it from just a safety standpoint, it's highly suspect. If you look at it from a scientific perspective, the agenda is nefarious. The use of a face mask is designed to protect not the doctor or the nurse, but the patient, so that when a surgeon is operating and doing a bypass surgery or a herniorrhaphy or a joint replacement, that if the surgeon sneezes or coughs or drools or spits or whatever, you don't want to get the surgical field contaminated. You want to maintain that sterile field. When people in the Far East, for example, wear a mask, they're wearing a mask so out of courtesy for other people, so that if they're sick, they're not going to get somebody else sick. That's the reason people wear masks. Now, this mandate of wearing a mask, if you notice during the press conferences with the president's never worn a face mask. So the first thing about a face mask is that we already talked about, it's suppressing the immune system because you're driving the person into a hypoxic state. There have been multiple studies that have been done on this where they've actually studied surgeons and seen the level of oxygenation, and especially on a chronic basis. Dr. Blaylock, Russell Blaylock, put out a great paper that summarized many of those research points. So we know that that happens. We know it suppresses the immune system because of that sympathetomimetic drive that we initiate because we're having to suck oxygen through the face mask. On top of that, we breathe out carbon dioxide. But when you've got a mask on, you're actually creating a decrease. You're creating actually an increase in respiratory drive because you get more carbon dioxide coming back from the face mask. Now, the face mask also creates other types of issues because you've got irritating your face and sweating and all the stuff. So you're always fiddling around with your face. And then the last point about the face, and there's a lot of points we can make about the face mask, but the last and most idiotic aspect of this is that it's like building a chain link fence to prevent a fly from getting into your house, or a split rail fence to keep mice out. The viral particles that we're trying to keep out of our bodies are so much smaller than the smallest pore of these masks.
Professor Dolores Cahill has said the following.
If people actually have the symptoms, they should wear a mask. But if you're like me, you had it, there is no need to wear a mask. But what a mask does, it's entirely the wrong thing. It actually reduces the oxygen supply to you. So it actually, everybody has latent viruses within their body. And because you're under oxygen stress, it allows viruses that were latent, because you're under stress, it decreases your immune system. So there is no need for wearing masks, only if you have symptoms. And if you have symptoms, you should just stay at home for the week, and then you will be immune.
Professor Judy Mikovits has also said this.
Wearing the mask literally activates your own virus. You're getting sick from your own reactivated coronavirus expressions. And if it happens to be SARS-CoV-2, then you've got a big problem.
Now the masks don't work, they just make you worse, but I know I see your face again. This article is from Quartz from 2014, a quick history of why Asians wear surgical masks in public. On the 7 train that connects Manhattan to the bustling ethnic enclave of Flushing, Queens, it's becoming more and more common to see riders wearing surgical masks in public. It's a phenomenon that's long been common in East Asian countries, and ever since the 2002 SARS outbreak and the 2006 bird flu pandemic, the practice has crossed over into immigrant Asian populations in the US. Now, with Ebola fears still on high, many immigrant Asians aren't taking chances, despite the fact that the number of known US Ebola infections has now dropped to 0, and assertions by public health authorities that Ebola is almost certainly not airborne transmissible. The reality is that the woven cloth surgical masks provide minimal protection from environmental viruses anyway. Surgeons use them to protect patients from their mouth-borne germs, not the other way around. But the mask's actual prophylactic utility is, in a way, secondary to other reasons they're being worn, which is why they're likely to become more common in the future, even among non-Asians. So the article goes on to talk about how the custom of wearing surgical masks developed in Japan in the early 20th century when a massive pandemic of influenza killed 20 to 40 million people around the world. But it was the last few paragraphs of the article that I wanted to focus on. Studies have found that among many young Japanese, masks have evolved into social firewalls. Perfectly healthy teens now wear them, along with audio headsets, to signal a lack of desire to communicate with those around them. This is particularly true for young women seeking to avoid harassment on public transport, who also appreciate the relative anonymity the masks provide. Masks are even becoming an element of East Asian style. In Japan, surgical masks bearing chic designs or the images of cute licensed characters can be purchased in every corner drugstore, while last month at China Fashion Week, designer Yin Peng unveiled a line of smog couture clothes paired with a variety of masks, from Vaderesque ventilators to whole-head riot gear rebreathers. So who knows? As pollution, climate change, and pandemic illness become a routine aspect of our global reality, we may soon see face mask fashion go viral, excuse the pun, in Western countries as well. Boy, this article sure was prophetic. Mask usage in Japan and China appears to insulate and socially isolate people to further avoid human contact, which I just think is incredibly sad. As you can see, and as I've stated previously, all the evidence in the world can be presented that masks are not useful and in fact potentially hazardous to a person, but we may be seeing a cultural change, and that's a whole different thing in my view. Think of Muslim countries with enforcement of things like headscarves or burqas for women. At a certain point, the wearing of face masks is not about personal health reasons, but merely an aspect of a society's culture, custom, and fashion. Certainly, the mandatory enforcement of masks is an infringement of individual human rights and bodily autonomy, but we are now living in a world where individual rights are trumped by the collective rights of the group, which is very disturbing. You have no right to go around publicly without a mask because you could get someone sick. You have no right to not socially distance in public because you could get someone sick. You have no right to go beyond the 5-kilometer distance from your home during a lockdown period because you could get someone sick. Then eventually it'll be, you have no right to be in public without a digital immunity cert or vaccine because you could get someone sick. If people still cannot see that this manufactured crisis is simply being used as an excuse to remove individual rights and freedoms and control people, then I honestly don't know how to help them. You are a human being with a right to your dignity. This forced mask-wearing agenda is monstrously authoritarian and I would say sadistic. People who wear them don't even realize they're submitting to tyranny and fear, and they're presenting themselves publicly like drones or branded sheep. Don't join the Borg Collective, no matter how much they intimidate you. You're an individual. Act like one.